What would you do when the entire world turns its back on you? When your enemies hire a sniper to take you down? When Aria Brooks, the woman of color who built Horizon Airways from scratch, is dragged out of court on false drug trafficking charges, it seemed like everything was over. No company, no reputation, no freedom. But instead of falling, Aria stood up. Armed with nothing but a rusty nail in her hand, a sharp mind, and a rage turned into a weapon, she turned the tables, making those who tried to destroy her lose everything. You won't be able to take your eyes off this extraordinary journey, where injustice is defeated by intellect and unbreakable willpower. Like, share, and subscribe now to join in one of the most powerful stories of overcoming adversity you've ever heard. Aria Brooks leisurely sipped her coffee in the first-class cabin, her simple hoodie nearly blending in with the luxurious leather seats. Her eyes were half closed, savoring the quiet, until Logan Bates, with his angular face and sneering smile, suddenly appeared, his shadow blocking the light. "You don't belong here. Get to economy class," he snapped. Aria looked up, calmly standing without a word. But before anything could escalate, the announcement came over the speaker. "Attention, dear passengers. We would like to announce that the owner of Aurora Skies Airlines is on board this flight today." Logan's face went pale. His hand, gripping the nameplate, trembled as he realized he had just insulted the wrong person, and it was none other than the billionaire owner herself. Aria gave a slight smile, not one of forgiveness, but a promise of an impending storm. She quietly sat down in an empty seat in economy, pulling the hood over her head to shield her sharp gaze. The seat was hard and small, the fabric faded. She adjusted her position, her hand lightly touching a patch of spilled soda that had not yet been cleaned, exhaling softly, indifferent as though the slap just now was nothing more than a passing breeze. The flight from Dallas to Cape Town would take 14 hours, a journey across the ocean, through continents. The air in economy was thick with the smell of cheap perfume and recycled air, in stark contrast to the leather and wine aromas in the front. But Aria didn't mind. She knew exactly who she was, a 42-year-old woman who once came from a poor slum, now the founder of a billion-dollar airline empire. For her, this incident was just a small stone on a well-paved road. Meanwhile, in first class, Logan paced back and forth, the sound of his polished shoes echoing steadily. His face was tight, as if preparing for a fight, but deep in his eyes was an unmistakable trace of anxiety. The captain's announcement still echoed in his mind like a sharp thorn. The owner is on board today. He wondered, who could that really be? A white old man in a pricey suit, sitting somewhere with a whiskey in hand? Certainly not the simple, quiet, out-of-place girl he had just kicked out without hesitation. She was too simple, too quiet, too not fitting the standard in his eyes. A wave of doubt surged within him, causing Logan to grip the microphone tightly. The cabin lights dimmed as the plane reached cruising altitude, the seatbelt sign chiming softly. Passengers around him stretched out, opened their laptops, and whispered while sneaking glances toward first class. From her seat, Aria could feel the curious gazes. A girl with braided hair and a man wearing an old baseball cap. They had witnessed the incident, and now they were secretly filming with their phones, the faint glow of their screens illuminating. Aria remained still. She had grown accustomed to these scrutinizing looks and subtle disdain since she was young. The very thing she had turned into fuel to rise above. She leaned back in her seat, appearing at ease. But in her mind, every calculation was already set like a chess game nearing its end. Meanwhile, Logan couldn't sit still. Sweat beaded on his palms. His collar felt like it was choking him. In his restlessness, he snatched the microphone from the service counter, pressing it down hard enough to make the sharp click sound. "Listen here," he growled, his voice echoing through the cabin. "If anyone is causing trouble, stay put. I run this cabin. Rules are rules, no exceptions." He slammed the mic down, chest heaving as he tried to reclaim his authority. His eyes quickly flickered toward Aria, now just a shadow with a hood in economy class. "No one important," he muttered to himself. Probably just some girl trying to scam a free ticket. But Aria did not move. She was preparing her counterattack. With a quick glance, she exchanged a look with the braids-haired girl, who was filming the empty first-class seat that Aria had just vacated. Aria could hear the girl whispering to her mother, "That guy's such a jerk. Who does he think he is?" Aria smiled faintly, a smile that lasted only a moment, sharp like a thin blade. She leaned forward, whispering to the girl, her voice soft as the wind brushing past her ear. "He's about to find out who I am." The girl's mouth dropped open, her phone aimed directly at Aria. But Aria had already pulled out her sleek black phone from her hoodie pocket, quickly typing a message. "Harper, leak the news now." Within minutes, the atmosphere in the plane's cabin felt like an angry hornet's nest. The man in the old cap, later known as Miles, gasped, his face stunned as his phone screen lit up with a tweet. "Flight attendant just kicked the president of Aurora Skies out of first class. She's a woman of color. Video coming soon." The short clip from the braids-haired girl, Sienna, quickly went viral on social media. The blurry footage captured Logan's sneering face and Aria's absolute calmness as she left. The hashtag, #WhyAch, Justice for Aria, started climbing rapidly. Up front, Logan still hadn't realized the disaster coming his way. He was still happily boasting to the passengers about the steak dinner, a fake smile glued to his face. Suddenly, Selena, a flight attendant with a neat bob haircut, her face as sharp as a knife, rushed over. In her hands was a tablet, shaking. "Logan, you're an idiot," she hissed, shoving the screen right in his face. On the screen was the video, now with over 50,000 views, clearly capturing Logan's own voice. "You don't belong here." His face turned ashen, and he quickly denied it. "It's fake. There's no way she's the owner." Selena rolled her eyes, her sigh so heavy it could burn the entire cabin. "That's Aria Brooks, the woman who built Aurora Skies from the ground up. And now you're famous, in the worst way possible." Whispers spread like wildfire. A man in a striped suit stood up, frowning at Logan. "You just slandered the boss, understand?" A black woman from the row behind pointed directly at him. "Serves him right, judging others." Logan's face turned red, his fists clenched but powerless. He turned back to look at economy class, where Aria sat, her face like ice, her eyes sharp as daggers. He wanted to scream that she was a fraud, but the radio on his side crackled. "Bates, you better fix this mess, or don't bother working when we land." The captain's voice was like a knife to his neck. Meanwhile, Aria didn't even bother to care. She sent another message to Harper. "Dig up his records, the complaints, send everything to CNN." This was not just about a seat. This was a reminder that her skin would never be enough in the eyes of people like Logan. Sienna and her mother continued filming quietly. They giggled as though witnessing a historical moment. Aria gave a subtle nod, whispering, her voice soft like a knife. "This is just the beginning. It's far from over." The plane continued to race through the night, the hum of the engines blending into the inky sky. But for Logan Bates, the storm was only just beginning. His career was plummeting, his reputation now a filthy quagmire, and Aria Brooks had barely lifted her heel to deliver the first blow. She glanced out the window, the heavy dark clouds below, reflecting the storm she was quietly brewing. "Let him writhe," Aria thought to herself. "He has no idea what he's up against." Logan staggered back toward the first-class curtain, his polished fake demeanor now cracking like cheap plaster under the pressure of hundreds of furious eyes. The cabin felt like a furnace, whispers and sarcastic muttering surrounding him. Phones flashed like fireflies, recording every embarrassed move he made. His tie now felt like a noose, his breath coming in short gasps, his hands shaking as he shoved them deep into his pockets, trying to appear calm. But he knew that video was everywhere. In just 1 hour, over 1 million views. The chorus of "You Don't Belong Here," his own voice, echoed in the minds of the public like a broken ringtone. Logan ground his teeth, then stormed toward the small galley. His brain was a mess, a jumbled mixture of rage and frantic denial. "She's a fraud," he told himself. "Just some girl pretending to be a billionaire for fun. No way she's the owner." In economy class, Aria remained still, like a statue, her hoodie pulled low to conceal her sharp features. Her fingers gently tapped on the armrest, her black eyes like a still, bottomless lake. Sienna, the braids-haired girl, was still secretly filming, the soft glow of her phone screen faintly visible. Nearby, the man in the old cap, Miles, was browsing the internet with his wife, his eyes flickering with surprise. Aria's phone vibrated lightly in her palm, a message from Harper. CNN had received the documents accusing Logan of racial discrimination, and everything was going live tonight. A faint smirk appeared on Aria's face, cold and lethal. She had made him bleed, his dark past now a feast for the whole world. But she also knew, people like Logan don't fall easily. They will thrash and bite until their last breath. Logan stormed into the galley, the heavy steel door slamming shut behind him. In front of him stood Selena, making coffee with an expression as cold as ice. Upon seeing him, she stopped, her eyes flashing with readiness for battle. "This," he growled, grabbing the tablet from the counter and shoving it in her face. On the screen, the video was still skyrocketing in views. But now it was worse. There was footage of him smirking in a bar from last year, coupled with numerous allegations from former colleagues about his discriminatory behavior. "Ridiculous," Logan screamed, throwing the tablet back. "It's all fabricated." "Selena, you know, stand by me." But Selena simply crossed her arms, her uniform pristine, her face as cold as steel. "Stand by you," she laughed. "You're an idiot. That's Aria Brooks, the woman who built Aurora Skies from nothing. You've just ruined your career. Don't drag anyone down with you." Logan staggered back, his mind empty. "No way," he stammered. "Look at her. Hoodie on, sitting in economy like a beggar. There's no airline owner like that." Selena only scoffed, her laugh sharp as a blade. "You're truly blind. She's a billionaire. Black, brilliant, and completely out of your league." Not willing to back down, Logan turned to Owen, the tall flight attendant who was arranging trays of food. "Did you see that? She's nothing like an airline owner," Logan hissed. Owen shrugged slightly, avoiding Logan's gaze. "I don't know, but that video is real, and the passengers are angry. You'd better calm down." Logan's face turned bright red as he slammed his hand on the counter, making the glass cups rattle. "That girl is ruining me." Selena smirked. "No, you're ruining yourself." In economy class, Aria could hear the commotion echoing back. She didn't need to look to know. Logan was panicking. She leaned towards Sienna, whispering, "He's digging his own grave. Keep filming." The girl nodded, her braids swaying with each movement. A new message from Harper lit up her screen. "The documents are out. CNN confirms it's going live tonight." Aria's heart slowed, not from fear, but from the quiet thrill of a hunter drawing her bow. Logan staggered back into the cabin, his uniform wrinkled, sweat sticking to his hair. The cabin now felt like a battlefield, with every passenger acting as a judge. The man in the striped suit stood up abruptly, his voice booming. "You're a disgrace. Apologize now." The black woman from earlier also stood up, pointing at him. "No one allows you to disrespect others like that." Logan froze, his mouth dry, the words choking in his throat. He wanted to shout, "She's a fraud!" but the chants rose like a tsunami, drowning out all resistance. In the dim light, Aria sat upright, her head slightly tilted, her eyes sharp as daggers. Suddenly, Logan screamed, his voice cracking. "She's a fraud! She doesn't own anything! I'll prove it!" Aria stood slowly, pulling down her hoodie, revealing a face with high cheekbones and eyes that flashed like lightning. "Then prove it," she said, her voice low like an undercurrent, loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. The cabin erupted with applause, cheers shaking the plane. But Logan refused to back down. In his desperation, he turned back to the galley and grabbed the intercom. His voice rasped through clenched teeth. "When we land, call security. Tell them she's a fraud." The plane continued gliding across the Atlantic, the endless Black Sea below, while inside, the atmosphere was boiling, awaiting the final showdown. Aria sat back down, her demeanor regal among the crowd. Her phone buzzed again. News about Logan was flooding everywhere. She knew he still had his final card, and she was ready to meet it. Sienna leaned in, whispering to Aria, "You're amazing. He's done for, right?" Aria's eyes glinted with coldness. "Not yet. He still has claws." Aria Brooks' hoodie fluttered lightly on her shoulders like an invisible shield. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and the electric charge of anticipation. The passengers around her murmured, their gazes filled with admiration. "You taught him a lesson, Miles," the man with the old falcon cap gently patted her on the shoulder as he rolled his suitcase down the aisle. Sienna, the braided-haired girl, had a bright smile on her face as she quickly shoved her phone into her pocket. Her mother nodded with a smile. "A legend," Sienna whispered. Aria's chest swelled, not out of pride, but from quiet determination. She knew she had won this round. Logan Bates was now a joke, his racist comments spreading everywhere, from New York to Tokyo. She walked slowly toward the aisle, her sneakers silent on the worn carpet, ready to leave the plane and head straight into the next battle. Up ahead, Logan was still lurking around the galley, his uniform wrinkled, his bloodshot eyes betraying his sleeplessness. He was like a spring wound too tight by anger, by the viral videos, by the betrayal from his colleagues. The walkie-talkie on his belt was still warm from the cowardly call about a disruptive passenger. As the jet bridge connected to the terminal, Logan forced a twisted smile. "She thinks she's untouchable," he muttered, tightening his tie, running his hand through his hair to salvage whatever dignity he had left. The captain's warning, "Fix your mistake or lose your job," now echoed hollow in his ears. Logan had crossed the line, and now he only wanted revenge. The cabin door swung open, the harsh African sunlight pouring in, blinding and overwhelming. Passengers began to disembark, the sound of suitcase wheels rumbling. Aria wasn't in a hurry. She slung her leather bag over her shoulder, walking with ease, her mind already on upcoming meetings and big deals for Aurora skies. To her, Logan's childish antics were just a small stone on the road. She stepped onto the jet bridge, the cool air from the terminal's AC hitting her face, making her shiver slightly. The crowd parted as she walked, some clapping, others pulling out their phones to take pictures. "Aria Brooks, you're a queen," a woman yelled in a thick native accent. Aria gave a slight smile, a brief flash of warmth amidst the steel armor she wore. She thought to herself, "I'm safe now. What else can he do?" But the terminal was a different beast. As soon as Aria crossed the threshold, the cheers died down. The air turned cold and heavy. 5 security officers in dull gray uniforms appeared, their shoes stamping loudly on the bright white tile. The leader, a burly man with a buzz cut and the CEPO badge glinting, raised his hand, signaling her to stop. "Stay where you are," he barked. Aria froze, her bag slipping from her shoulder. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice calm, but her eyes already on high alert. The leader tightened his grip on his gun holster, growling each word. "You're under arrest for suspicion of impersonating the owner of Aurora Skies. Hands up now." The terminal erupted, screams, phones lighting up like fireflies. But for Aria, the world seemed to shrink down to the cold click of the handcuffs snapping onto her wrists. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She simply stared into the leader's eyes, her voice cutting through the noise. "You've got the wrong person." "Check again," he scoffed, yanking her down a side hallway. The crowd parted as they moved through, like water splitting around a rock. "Go tell my boss," he muttered under his breath. Through a glass door, Aria caught a glimpse of Logan, hiding behind a ticket counter, his face twisted into a malicious, triumphant grin. Her heart sank. He had done it. He had turned her victory into a filthy trap. They dragged her through a maze of corridors, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead like mocking eyes. The air was thick with the smell of sweat and decaying paper. The passengers who had witnessed the scene raised their phones, recording the spectacle. Someone shouted, "Let her go!" But the security guards were unmoved. Aria was shoved into an elevator, the door slamming shut. It descended 2 floors, taking her to the damp basement of the airport, where dreams were buried in cold concrete. A bare, empty cell. Peeling walls. A single flickering light. A metal bench bolted to the floor. The leader removed the handcuffs, roughly pushing her into the room before slamming the door shut. The sound of the lock clicking felt like a knife stabbing into her heart. Aria rubbed her sore wrists and slowly walked around the cramped room. The soles of her sneakers scraped against the grimy cement floor. She knew this wasn't just about a plane seat anymore. This was an entire system that Logan was using to crush her. He thought her skin color would break her. He was wrong. While she waited, Aria scanned the room and noticed a rusty nail sticking out of the metal bench. Carefully, she bent it free, scratching a jagged message on the peeling wall. Aria Brooks, Aurora Skies, CEO. Call Harper in Houston. She hid the nail in her sock, sitting up straight, her eyes burning like smoldering embers. Out there, Harper, her team, and the passengers still filming, they were all the guiding light leading her way. The door creaked open, and in stepped Logan. His uniform was wrinkled, his eyes shining with triumphant victory. "Well, well, little sister," he sneered, leaning against the doorframe. "No more first-class seats, huh?" His breath reeked of stale coffee and dirty schemes. "Security's on my side." "You're finished," he laughed coldly. Aria lifted her head, her voice like a storm. "You think locking me in this hole will break me? You have no idea who you're messing with." Logan chuckled bitterly, slamming the door behind him. His footsteps echoed, growing fainter in the dark corridor. But Aria wasn't afraid. She had only just begun the fight. Up above, in the chaos of the crowd, Sienna's mother quietly slipped a crumpled note into the hands of a cleaning staff member. "Here's a note," she whispered. "Her seat. She's the owner. They've locked her up in the basement." The cleaner nodded, slipping away from the crowd. A small spark of hope began to glow. Meanwhile, in Houston, Harper was orchestrating like a storm, calling lawyers, applying media pressure. But time was tightening its grip around Aria with each passing minute. A voice whispered by the door of the cell. "The station chief's on the take. Hang in there." A young guard quickly dropped a pen into the room and disappeared. Aria grabbed the pen like a drowning person clinging to a life raft. She etched deeper into the wall with the makeshift tool, her call for help growing more desperate. In her mind, Logan's cruel smile resurfaced. He thought he had trapped her. He was completely wrong. The heavy metal door creaked open, and Logan Bates staggered in, his uniform wrinkled, sweat plastered to his forehead. He moved in like a predator, his eyes gleaming with madness. "I told you," he hissed, crossing his arms and leaning against the wall, a cruel smile twisting on his lips. "The guards are on my side. The station chief, too. This place is mine. You're going to rot here." He eyed her from head to toe, his gaze filled with hatred. Aria Brooks didn't blink. Her stare was sharp, like a blade cutting through him. "You're a small man, Logan," she replied, her voice calm. "Small in mind and soul. Don't think locking me behind these walls will stop me." Logan let out a dry laugh, stepping closer, his shadow overtaking the dim light of the room. "Keep dreaming," he sneered. "Your files are locked. No lawyer, no contact. Just these four walls." His words made her realize the young guard from earlier had been right. The whole system had been bought by Logan. She had lost her phone, alone in the decaying maze. Time was tightening its grip around her with each passing second. But Aria wasn't unfamiliar with traps like this. From nothing, she had built an empire amid the sneering faces of white men in boardrooms. Logan kept babbling, pacing around the room like a victor, his boots scraping the floor with each step, sending chills down her spine. "You think some cheap videos will bring me down?" he spat. "I've buried more people like you than I can count." He stopped, leaned in close to her, his breath sour with coffee and malice. "No one's coming. That stupid message you wrote is worthless," he sneered, pointing at the message Aria had scratched into the wall. She tilted her head slightly, a half-smile playing on her lips, her eyes sparkling with the light of victory. "You talk too much. I guess deep down, you know you've already lost," she whispered. Her sharp reply made Logan's smile falter before he slammed his hand against the door and stormed out, the sound of the lock clicking coldly. Aria stood up, walking around the small 5x7 room, her footsteps silent. The rusty nail she had hidden in her sock was now warm in her hand. She traced it with her fingers sharp and pointed, much like the determination within her. With the nail, she etched the word urgent onto the crumbling wall, the mark strong and forceful, like a small flame flickering in the darkness. If anyone finds it, just one person, she would have a chance. Time passed slowly. The only light flickered like a candle about to die out. Her legs ached from standing for so long, but she wouldn't allow herself to sit. She listened for the smallest sound, distant cartwheels, the quiet murmur of the guards changing shifts. A faint noise outside the door. The door creaked open. The young guard appeared, his uniform too big, his eyes darting nervously like a hunted rabbit. "They're stalling," he whispered. "The station chief canceled your release papers. Logan paid $5,000. Aria's stomach tightened, but her face remained unchanged. She slipped the pen and a piece of her hoodie into the young guard's hand, a note with the detailed message of her plea for help. He nodded quickly, shoved it into his pocket, and disappeared. She fell back into silence, but this time, she was not alone. There was a thin thread, but it was real, connecting her to the world outside. Heavy footsteps echoed. The door swung open. The CYPO chief, the burly guard, entered, his face smug. "Stay here." He tossed a bag of dry bread onto the chair. No phone calls, nothing. He lingered, almost daring her to break. But Aria only looked at him, her gaze icy enough to make him snort and walk away. She tore the bread into small pieces, scattering them across the room like a marker of time. Her mind raced like a whirlwind. Harper was surely hunting for leads in Houston. Miles, Sienna, her mother, and dozens of other passengers had already spread the story. The light flickered out in a single beat. In the brief darkness, she clenched her fist and took a deep breath. Then, from afar, came the commotion. The pounding of feet. The heavy sound of metal doors slamming. The cell door flew open. Light flooded in, and Harper, small yet filled with fire, led a group of 2 lawyers in sharp suits, followed by a pale-faced airport official. "We have evidence," Harper declared loudly, waving a tablet with an electronic signature. "Permits and official ownership papers for Aurora Skies. Uncuff her. Let her go." Aria stood up, her posture proud even though her body was weary. The hoodie slipped from her shoulder, revealing her unblemished, determined face. The chief guard stammered as he fumbled with the handcuff keys, avoiding her gaze. They hurried to pull her out of the dark basement. The terminal light blazed brightly and cheers erupted. Passengers from the flight stood clapping. Logan was nowhere to be seen, but his spiteful breath still lingered in the air. Aria took a deep breath. The freedom air tasted sweet, but deep inside, she knew this battle wasn't over. As they reached the door, the harsh sunlight of Cape Haven struck her skin like a hot knife. Harper had quickly called the press, preparing for a press conference to bring down Logan. Aria felt like she had made it through, but an instinct told her this was just the beginning. The crowd was chaotic, their clothes soaked with sweat and dirt, screaming in furious rage. "She's not the owner of anything," a man shouted, hurling a beer bottle toward Aria Brooks, shattering just a few steps away from her. The shards of glass glittered on the pavement. The crowd was in a panic, their screams tearing through the air. But Aria didn't budge. Her jaw clenched, her mind racing like a storm. This wasn't random. This was Logan Bates. His venom had spilled onto the streets. Harper, her loyal assistant, grabbed Aria's hand, pulling her sharply. "Move, Aria. Hurry." Her voice was as sharp as a whip. The crowd closed in, the insults rolling in waves. "Fraud. You don't belong here." A stone grazed Harper's shoulder, the blood soaking through her white shirt. Aria pulled her to her feet, breath coming in quick gasps. The police stood there, a thin line of blue, their arms crossed over their chests, faces as cold as stone. "Do something," a reporter yelled, pointing a camera at the group of officers. But they just stood there. Aria's stomach churned. She had seen this before. Times when power turned its back simply because of her skin color. Logan had bought more than she thought. $5,000 was just the beginning. Only a few meters now. The furious crowd brandishing bottles and sticks, sunlight gleaming off their crude weapons. Aria scanned the area, spotting an old yellow taxi parked quietly at the side of the road. "There!" she yelled, pulling Harper toward it. Another beer bottle exploded behind them. The two of them jumped into the car, the door slamming shut just as the crowd began banging on the windows, the sound of cracking glass echoing. "Drive!" Aria shouted. The tires squealed as the car shot off. The screams faded behind them like a nightmare. Aria collapsed into the torn fabric seat, her chest heaving. "Are you okay?" she asked, her eyes flashing with concern. Harper nodded, her lips pressed tight, her hand clutching the wound, blood seeping through her fingers. "Those bastards! They'll pay for this," she hissed. The taxi weaved through the crowded streets of Cape Haven, bustling markets stretching in colorful lines. But Aria's mind kept spinning. Logan was more than just a petty, jealous steward. He had turned the entire city into a weapon. She looked out the window. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows on the road. She thought she had escaped. Click. The sound of the lock clicking shut was cold and final. Aria's heart skipped a beat. In the rearview mirror, the driver grinned, his yellowed teeth gleaming, his eyes flashing with malice. "Logan paid me double to take you to the slums," he chuckled. Blood rushed to Aria's face. Her hand slid down to the sock where she had hidden the rusty nail from the jail cell. "Let us out," she growled, each word sharp like a blade. But the driver simply swerved, turning into a maze of dirt alleys choking with dust. Harper yanked at the door. Locked. She pounded on it, but it was useless. The taxi revved its engine, leaving the brightly lit streets behind, plunging into a world of darkness, smoke, and garbage. Only makeshift shacks made of scrap metal and wood remained. No police. No help. As the car slowed in a narrow alley, Aria took action. She jammed the rusty nail into the lock, twisting hard. "Click! Get out!" she screamed, pushing the door open. Harper stumbled out first. The driver lunged after them, but Aria kicked him in the wrist, then darted out, the dust swirling around them. They ran, but they were not safe. They ducked behind a pile of rotting wood. The sound of heavy footsteps pounding on the ground echoed through the alley. Aria held her breath. They were being hunted. "We don't stop," she whispered, her eyes scanning the collapsed roofs of nearby buildings. Harper nodded, her lips pale, the wound bleeding through her shirt. "We need help. No phones, no team. Just dust, darkness, and a rusty nail." A shadow passed by, a man in a black cap, a stick in hand. Not the driver. Worse, Logan's henchman. Aria pulled Harper deeper into the dark alley, the sound of feet scraping the ground behind them. They found a dilapidated hut. Slipping inside, they hid behind a pile of old blankets. Through a cracked window, Aria saw the crowd of people outside. Logan didn't need to be there. His hatred had turned the whole city into a trap. The door of the shack swung open. An old woman, small and frail, with sharp eyes, stood in the doorway. "They're coming." "Hide quickly," she whispered, tossing blankets over them. The screams were getting louder. The sound of boots pounding the ground. The stench of garbage thickened the air. Aria gripped the rusty nail in her hand. Her body coiled like a taut string. She had won at the airport, escaped the prison. But now, this was the real battlefield. Now, Aria Brooks was not just fighting for her freedom, but for her very survival. A pure, instinctive battle. The leader swung his club down, barely missing Aria's head by inches. But she reacted like lightning. She leapt up, driving the rusty nail into the man's wrist and twisting hard. He screamed in agony, the club flying from his hands, clattering to the ground. "Harper, run!" Aria shouted, pushing her assistant toward the door as the thin man with a knife lunged toward them. Aria bent low, grabbing a broken steel pipe from the rubble, and swung it hard into the man's knee. A sickening crack echoed through the air. The man crumpled, groaning in pain. Only the trembling boy remained, his hands clutching the knife tightly. Aria growled, her voice thunderous. The boy turned and fled, nearly tripping over a fallen cast-iron pot. The shack had become a battlefield. But Aria stood firm, breathing heavily, her body charged with energy. Harper limped out of the shack, clutching her wound. Aria followed, the steel pipe dragging along the ground. The old woman stood waiting, her hand trembling as she pointed to the left. "Hide there," she whispered. Without hesitation, Aria pulled Harper toward a series of shacks, weaving between them, the rusty, weathered roofs casting shadows in the blood-red glow of the setting sun. Behind them, the shouts rose again, the crowd gathering, the sound of heavy boots pounding the earth. But Aria didn't run aimlessly. She spotted an abandoned storage shed with a broken door hinge. She yanked Harper inside, hiding behind a stack of old crates, the pungent smell of rust and oil filling the air. She blocked the door with the steel pipe, her hand shaking, but her eyes as cold as steel. "Quiet," Aria whispered. Harper nodded, gasping for air, her eyes burning with fury. Outside, the mob screamed. "Kyle wants her head." The shouts echoed in. Aria gripped the steel pipe tighter. This wasn't just chaos. This was an attempted murder with intent. A new sound broke the tension. The roar of a car engine. Aria held her breath. Could it be the taxi driver? No. Worse. The shed door flew open. The steel pipe flew from her hand. Logan Bates appeared, his baseball bat in hand, his eyes flashing with violent rage. "I found you," he hissed, his voice choking with anger. He swung the bat at Aria's head. She rolled out of the way, the bat smashing into a wooden crate. Harper screamed and stumbled back, while Aria quickly got to her feet, the rusty nail barely visible in her hand. Logan came at her again, swinging the bat wildly. Aria dodged, then jabbed the nail into his forearm. Blood sprayed out. He howled, the bat falling from his hands. Not missing a beat, Aria kicked his leg out from under him, sending him stumbling. "You're nothing," she yelled, charging at him, landing blow after blow to his chest and face. Logan thrashed, but his strength was quickly fading. Aria was a storm, sweeping away all resistance. Outside, the thudding of the thug's feet grew louder. Aria hauled Logan up and shoved him toward the door. "Tell them you've failed," she roared, pushing him out. The door slammed shut. She blocked it with the wooden crates, sealed tight. Inside, she breathed heavily, her body soaked in sweat. Her hands were covered in his blood, a dark, sticky red. Then, a new sound. The voice of a young boy, his tone high-pitched but full of excitement. "Here, I'm live streaming." Aria peeked through the gap in the wood. A young boy, maybe 12, was holding a phone toward the shed, streaming live to social media. The crowd outside hesitated, their screams quieting down. "That's Logan. She won." The live stream exploded with views. People watched live. Harper whispered, her eyes shining brightly. "You've won." But Aria shook her head, her eyes as cold as steel. "Not yet." Outside, Logan staggered to his feet, his arm bleeding, his face bruised. He screamed, "This isn't over." Then, limping, he disappeared into the shadows. Aria gripped the steel pipe tightly, sweat dripping down her forehead. Her breath was shallow. She had survived. She had taken down the thugs. But Logan, the venomous snake, was still lurking, waiting. The old woman rushed in, holding a rag. "Child, you are a warrior," she whispered, handing Aria the cloth to wipe away the blood. Outside, the cheers erupted. Aria wiped her hands, her eyes glowing with determination. The live stream was spreading worldwide. She had not only survived, she had turned hatred into a weapon of counterattack. But she knew this was only the beginning. Logan hadn't given up, and neither had Aria Brooks. Logan Bates staggered through the night, blood dripping from his shredded arm, his face contorted in pain and bitter rage. He collapsed on the side of the road, opening his phone with trembling fingers. In that desperate moment, he made his final strike. He forged financial reports, accusing Aria Brooks of tax fraud, embezzling millions. He hit send. The email flew to all the major media outlets, CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera. His mouth twisted into a grimace of satisfaction. "Let's see if you can crawl out of this one," he muttered, then vanished into the night. In the Soweto slums, Aria was still surrounded by the cheers of the crowd. A local man handed her a cold, wet bottle of water. Aria drank it eagerly, her throat dry from shouting. Beside her, Harper was yelling into the phone, "Get the car ready. We need to leave now." The crowd surrounded Aria, shielding her like a living shield. Thao, the boy holding the phone for the live stream, looked up and grinned widely. "You're famous now," he said. Aria ruffled his hair, the first tender gesture after the chaos. She thought she was safe, but she was wrong. It came fast. A reporter jumped when his phone rang. Then another. Then the rest. Their faces drained as they read the news. Aria Brooks. A white reporter wearing a BBC badge shouted, "We got the documents. Horizon Airways is bankrupt. She's accused of fraud. What do you have to say for yourself?" Aria froze. The water bottle slipped from her hand, splashing on her sweat-soaked sneakers. "What?" she yelled. But the wave of doubt had already begun to spread. Harper grabbed the reporter's phone, quickly reading the email. Her face turned pale. "Fake," she growled. "Fake news." But it was too late. The news apps were buzzing non-stop. Headlines flooded in. Aria Brooks in scandal. Horizon Airways collapses in disgrace. The crowd wavered. Doubt crept in. Some stepped back. Some whispered. Aria grabbed Thau's phone, shouting into the live stream, "This is a trap. Logan Bates is behind this. Check your sources." But the press didn't relent. The microphone was shoved into her face. Questions fired relentlessly. "Where's the money? What are you hiding? Tax evasion?" The crowd began to thin. Faith was cracking. Aria's chest tightened. She was going from hero to villain in the eyes of the world. In just minutes. Harper was still shouting into the phone, ordering the Atlanta team to cover their tracks. But the forged documents had spread like a virus. Sirens blared. The police arrived. But they didn't come to help. They shoved the crowd aside, hands resting on their gun holsters, their eyes cold and unfeeling as they stared at Aria. "Step down, ma'am," one officer growled. Aria heard the creak of a wooden chair under her feet. Slowly, she lowered herself from the crate, the makeshift pedestal that had once elevated her to an icon, now crumbling under the weight of betrayal. Some in the crowd still shouted, "She's innocent!" But many more turned and walked away in silence. Aria clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms, reminding herself to stay focused. Logan had turned her name into a target, using his hatred as a battering ram to crush her reputation on social media. Harper pulled her toward an SUV waiting nearby. The driver was from Horizon, his face as cold as steel. "Let's go," Harper shouted. Bottles and rocks hit the car windows. The vehicle lurched forward, tearing through the chaos. Aria slumped into the cool leather seat, her torn hoodie and sneakers caked in dust, her eyes blazing with the fire of a fighter. The SUV sped through the narrow alleyways, leaving the slums behind, the distant wail of sirens fading. "Take me to Atlanta," she commanded, her voice as cold as ice. When the private jet touched down in Atlanta, the humid Georgia night enveloped Aria. She dragged herself off the plane, her sneakers heavy with dirt, her hoodie in tatters. Beside her, Harper walked silently, a bandage on her shoulder, her hands clutching a tablet. Messages flooded in. Horizon Airways lost 30% of its value in just 24 hours. The board of directors was holding an emergency meeting. To the boardroom, Aria ordered the driver. The car veered toward the city center, where Horizon's glass and steel headquarters stood like a fortress. The boardroom. 12 members of the board sat around the table. No one stood to greet her. Edward Rollins, the chairman of the board, a white man with salt and pepper hair and ice-cold eyes, stood up. "We've voted, Aria. You're removed. The documents, they can't be denied." Aria froze. Her heart tightened. The faces she had trusted, now only filled with suspicion and coldness. Harper plugged a USB drive into the projector. The screen lit up. Jamal Rivers, the IT specialist, began to present. "Here's evidence of unauthorized logins from Johannesburg, right when Aria was attacked." The boardroom fell silent. Digital fingerprints, real-time data, indisputable. Priya Mehta, the Indian CFO, gasped. "A flight attendant? How could he do this?" Aria smirked. "Because he hated me. Because he underestimated me." Jamal added, "All the accounts are fake offshore companies. She's innocent." The room buzzed with activity. Another vote, 7-5. Aria Brooks was officially reinstated as CEO. She exhaled, thinking she had won. But just then, the door swung open. A man stepped in. Victor Crane, 60 years old, slick silver hair, a perfectly tailored suit, a shark in the business world. His eyes were cold as ice. Victor Crane, the minority shareholder holding 10% of Horizon Airways, a relic from the company's early days, stood tall in the boardroom. A sinister smile crept across his face. "It's too late," Victor said, his voice as cold as steel, throwing a thick stack of papers onto the table. "A court order." The documents were sharp and notarized. "I've locked everything. The headquarters, bank accounts, everything." On the street below, through the glass window, the shadows of men in black, with gleaming rifles, hovered under the streetlights. Aria Brooks' stomach clenched. Her victory turned to dust. Victor tilted his head, his voice a razor's edge. "You're just a diversity decoration, Aria. A temporary stroke of luck. I have proof, real proof. Either resign or tomorrow the whole world will see who you really are." Aria scanned the security outside the building, standing like statues, motionless. She narrowed her eyes, defying him. "You're lying?" Victor just smirked, pulling out another stack of files. Testimonies, forged emails, documents bearing her signature. "Care to explain these shady contracts?" Harper lunged forward, grabbing the papers, her eyes quickly scanning them. "They're all fake," she screamed. "Dates don't match. The signatures are wrong." Victor just shrugged. "Take it to the press. They'll devour it like a pack of sharks." Edward Rollins, the chairman of the board, slumped down. His face was pale. "If he has proof?" "We're done for," he stammered. The loyalty of the entire board crumbled. Aria could feel her empire slipping from her grasp, inch by inch. She gripped the court order tightly, the embossed paper, the court seal still intact. Victor added, taunting, "Game over, little girl." The boardroom fell apart. Some rushed to gather documents. Others avoided her gaze. Only Aria remained, a shadow in a hoodie reflected on the screen, flashing the damning news. Outside, the steady rhythm of the security team's footsteps echoed like the drums of war. Harper gripped Aria's hand. "Let's go. Fight back in court. We need to pull back." They left the building through the back stairs, weaving past the guards. The SUV sped through the night in Atlanta, leaving Horizon's glass fortress behind. Aria sat still, but in her eyes burned the fire of battle. "He's got the money," she whispered, "but I've got the brains." The counterattack campaign began that very night. Harper was on the phone, securing lawyers, gathering evidence for the countersuit. Jamal Rivers, the IT expert, traced the hack back to the Johannesburg server. The lawsuit was filed early the next morning. Aria Brooks sued Victor Crane, Logan Bates, and some members of the Horizon board for defamation, forgery, racial discrimination. By 3 p.m., Aria appeared in federal court. Her gray suit hugged her tired but resilient form. Judge Marcia Hargrove, a black woman with eyes as sharp as a blade, presided over the case. Outside, reporters crowded the hallways. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Aria's lawyer turned over the forged evidence. Fake emails from the time Aria had been hiding in the Soweto slums. Photoshopped signatures. Jamal stood up. "Logan from Johannesburg. There's no way it was her." On the other side, lawyer Pierce fought back with bribed witnesses, lies full of holes. Aria silently hissed, "Scum." Finally, the gavel came down with a resounding crack. "Sufficient grounds," Judge Hargrove declared. "Cancel the lock on Horizon Airways." The courtroom erupted in cheers. Aria's team embraced, jubilant. She smiled, thinking the nightmare was finally over. But as she stepped out onto the courthouse steps, everything collapsed again. The screech of sirens rang out. A police car slammed to a halt. The DEA team swarmed in, surrounding Aria. "Ms. Aria Brooks, you're under arrest." The cold cuffs snapped onto her wrists. The reporters were stunned. A DEA officer, grim-faced, read the warrant. Charges: possession and trafficking of drugs. Aria froze. A wave of fury and despair surged within her. They had planted drugs in her office. Photos with white chalk outlines marked AB were thrown onto the table. Breaking news exploded. Billionaire Aria Brooks, airline queen or drug lord. She knew. This wasn't just Logan. This was Victor Crane, who had bought the entire system. Now, Aria had to fight not just for her company, but for her life. Aria Brooks sat in the cold, sterile holding cell of the Atlanta police station, her once expensive suit now crumpled and worn. Outside, Harper Quinn stormed in like a whirlwind, bringing a team of lawyers, slamming the bail request onto the table with defiance. But Detective Torres only smirked coldly. "Your friend has quite the influence. Once you're in court, good luck." The police station turned into a hornet's nest, whispers and murmurs among the officers filling the air. Reporters pressed against the gates. Aria was locked in a freezing cell, but her mind was a furnace burning with intensity. She knew exactly what had happened. The drugs had been planted. She didn't yet know how, but the motive was clear. Logan Bates and Victor Crane had set everything up. They had lost the game before. Now they played their deadliest card. Harper screamed into the phone, demanding to meet with the prosecutor, while Jamal Rivers dug through surveillance tapes searching for proof. Time passed slowly, the cold seeping into her bones. But Aria didn't falter. She had built an empire from nothing. This vile trap wouldn't break her. The bail was set at an astronomical amount, $10 million. By exhausting all her emergency accounts, she was released just before midnight. Flashbulbs popped as she stepped out, ignoring the razor-sharp questions. "Did you commit a crime, Aria?" She quietly climbed into the SUV. Inside the car, Harper whispered in her ear, "We have the video. A Horizon employee broke into your office that night." Aria nodded, her jaw clenched tight. They sped toward a new safe house in downtown Atlanta. In the quiet darkness, Jamal sat at the laptop, pulling up the video. A shadowy figure in a Horizon uniform, face obscured, slipped into her office, dragging a heavy duffel bag behind him. "It's him," Jamal muttered, zooming in on the timestamp. The time matched the chaos in Johannesburg. She had the evidence. Logan wasn't just a thug. He was a well-organized saboteur. But Torres and the DEA remained silent. "He's got a big umbrella," Aria thought bitterly. The morning of the trial, Aria Brooks appeared in the Atlanta federal court. Her navy blue suit fit her tired yet resilient body. But it was her eyes, like fire forged in the storm. On the other side, prosecutor Claire Voss, a sharp-eyed white woman with a bobbed haircut, threw out each accusation like a knife. Aria Brooks, a drug queen masquerading as a businesswoman. The evidence: 50 pounds of cocaine in her office safe. The AB markings on the packaging, matching fingerprints. Aria kept her face impassive. Her legal team countered with the video. Jamal presented, "There's no sign of a break-in. The uniform matches Logan Bates. The timing lines up." On the other side, Claire Voss attempted to refute with a paid-off witness, their testimony riddled with flaws. Aria hissed to herself, "Scum." Finally, the gavel came down with a sharp crack. "Insufficient evidence," Judge Hargrove declared. "Cancel the lock on Horizon Airways." The courtroom erupted. Aria's team embraced, jubilant. She smiled, thinking the nightmare was finally over. But as soon as she stepped out onto the courthouse steps, everything came crashing down. The shrill sound of sirens pierced the air. A police car skidded to a stop. The DEA team surged forward, surrounding Aria. "Ms. Aria Brooks, you are under arrest." Cold cuffs snapped onto her wrists. The reporters were stunned. A DEA officer, grim-faced, read the warrant. Charges: possession and trafficking of drugs. Aria froze. Rage and despair surged within her. They had planted drugs in her office. Photographs with white chalk outlines marked AB were thrown on the table. Breaking news exploded. Billionaire Aria Brooks, airline queen or drug lord. She knew. This wasn't just Logan. This was Victor Crane, who had bought the entire system. Now, Aria had to fight not only for her company, but for her life. Aria Brooks threw herself on top of Harper Quinn, pinning her to the floor just as the bullet whizzed past, shattering the window and embedding itself deep into the wall behind them. Glass shards fell like rain. Jamal Rivers quickly rolled for cover, his laptop still glowing brightly. Aria lay flat against the floor, her breath shallow, the rusty nail from her sock tightly gripped in her hand. The shot had been silent, a suppressed gun, but the message screamed loud and clear. Logan Bates wasn't just pulling legal tricks. He had hired a hitman. In the cold loft, Aria crawled behind a chair, her mind racing, trying to find an escape. "He's lost it," Harper gasped, clutching the tablet. Aria nodded, her eyes sharp as knives. The crowd was a diversion. The recording was bait. "This bullet is his final move," Jamal shouted from behind a desk. "Logan's phone signal! 8 kilometers away, moving!" Aria sprang to her feet, her foot crunching through the broken glass. If he's close, we're closer. Atlanta outside had become a battlefield. Smoke, sirens, a surge of panicked people. But Aria didn't retreat. They jumped into the SUV, speeding through the streets engulfed in smoke and burning vehicles. Harper gripped the steering wheel tightly, eyes scanning the road, while Jamal's eyes were locked on his laptop, tracking the flashing signals. Aria threw on her sneakers from the trunk, abandoning her broken high heels. The warehouse, the final rendezvous, appeared in the night, a dark, crumbling mass of steel and brick. Only one decrepit sedan was parked by the side. "His car," Aria whispered. They moved in quietly. She still gripped the rusty nail. Harper with a heavy iron bar ready, while Jamal held the laptop like a shield. Through a cracked door, Aria saw Logan, his Horizon uniform torn, his face swollen, his hand gripping a handgun. He paced back and forth, muttering, "Tonight, that bitch has to die." Another shadow lurked nearby, probably the second sniper, waiting in reserve. Aria signaled for Harper and Jamal to split up. She kicked the door open. The sound was deafening. Logan spun around, gun pointed straight at her. "Scum like you don't belong here," he screamed. The bullet zipped past her head, slamming into the brick wall behind her. Aria darted toward a crate, taking cover, shouting, "Don't you get it? I was born to defeat scum like you." He fired again, wild, aimless shots. Aria baited him, her heels skimming the dust, leading him into a dark alley, the trap she had set. The gun clicked empty. Logan screeched, "I'll snap your neck with my bare hands." He lunged, but Aria was faster. The rusty nail in her hand drove deep into his thigh. Blood sprayed out like a geyser. Logan screamed, collapsing to the ground. Aria snatched the gun from his hand, slamming the butt into his chin. The bone cracked. He fell flat on his back. She pressed her knee into his chest, driving the nail into his throat. "This ends here." Harper and Jamal rushed over, weapons ready. From a distance, police sirens blared. A patrol car sped toward them, lights flashing. Aria stood, raising her hand and throwing the gun away, her voice cold. "He attacked me." The police cuffed Logan, who was screaming, blood staining his shirt. Aria thought she had won. But then Jamal's phone buzzed. A message from Harper's contact. Victor Crane bailed him out. The blood in Aria's veins turned to ice. She watched the police car carrying Logan vanish into the night. Victory? A joke. Logan was still above the law. Victor was still pulling the strings, and the battlefield stretched further than ever. Aria sank into the SUV seat, her shoes stained with blood and dirt. The rusty nail was still tucked into her sock. "Find Victor," she ordered Jamal, her voice as sharp as molten steel. Jamal nodded, the laptop screen lighting up, the blue glow illuminating the scars that had yet to heal on their faces. The nightmare wasn't over, but Aria Brooks had never lost. Aria Brooks and Jamal Rivers sat in the dark cabin, the only light coming from the small laptop, illuminating their determined faces. Victor Crane is draining the accounts. $2 million just vanished an hour ago, Jamal said, his glasses reflecting the screen's light. Aria gripped the rusty nail tightly in her palm. She knew Victor was funding Logan Bates to flee. They weren't simply enemies. They had built a network to destroy her. The next morning, a blow landed straight to her face. Horizon Airways files for bankruptcy. Every news outlet was flooded with images of Aria Brooks, once an icon, now tarnished as a failure. Harper Quinn angrily threw the remote onto the table. "I can't believe this. They've destroyed us." Jamal wasn't faring much better. Accounts frozen. Assets seized. SEC is investigating. Aria stood up, walking across the creaking wooden floor. Her eyes showed no despair, only a cold, ruthless glint. "Prepare for the press conference. Downtown, noon." Harper blinked in surprise but didn't ask further. She knew Aria had a plan. The SUV sped through the awakening streets of Atlanta. Jamal updated them. "Victor is at the penthouse. Logan has disappeared. But I'm still tracking his signal." But Aria didn't need to hear more. She was already 3 steps ahead of them. The parking lot near Horizon's headquarters, once hers, was now the stage. When Aria Brooks stepped up, the reporters surged forward, microphones thrust into her face. One yelled, "Aria Brooks is finished, right?" Aria raised her hand, and the silence immediately engulfed the crowd. Her worn hoodie, a challenge to the elite in their sharp suits. "Listen," she said, her voice resonating. "Yes, Horizon is bankrupt, but I am not." The parking lot held its breath. Aria pulled out the tablet, opening a document before the cameras. 3 days ago, I sold all of Horizon. Planes, routes, assets, clean, legal. $2 billion into my pocket. The crowd erupted. Harper projected the documents onto a big screen. The contracts notarized before Logan even fired the first shot. I knew they would attack. I had set the trap from the start. Aria paused for a moment, then dropped another bombshell. Yesterday, I bought Crane Holdings. Victor Crane is now my employee, and I'm firing him right here. She tapped the screen. The termination contract was broadcast live. The crowd went wild. The cameras swung frantically. Reporters screamed questions. The scene changed. Victor Crane, sitting stunned in his penthouse, watching his empire collapse in real time. "What about Logan Bates?" a reporter yelled. Jamal laughed. "He's being arrested at his motel." Aria Brooks crossed her arms, her eyes as cold as ice. "They used hatred to burn me, but I used it to build my throne." As they left the press conference, the crowd was still chanting, "Aria, Aria, Aria." In the back of the SUV, Aria leaned her head back, her hand still gripping the rusty nail like a symbol of victory. Harper glanced at her, asking quietly, "Where to next?" Aria smiled, her eyes sharp as a blade. "Start again. Higher, further." The story ends. Aria Brooks, from being humiliated on the plane, turned shame into strength. She not only survived, but rebuilt an empire stronger, grander than before. Logan Bates, the ignorant bigot, rots in prison, savoring his failure. Victor Crane, the racist tycoon, lost everything, becoming a laughingstock on television. Their hatred was the ladder Aria used to climb higher than ever. She is Aria Brooks, the woman who turned violence into a crown. When all doors are closed, will you fall or break through the walls? Aria Brooks has proven that. No one can define you by your skin color, circumstances, or fabricated lies. No force, whether powerful figures like Victor Crane or shadows like Logan Bates, can extinguish the light from a fearless heart. From being cast out of a coach seat to rebuilding an empire from scratch, Aria didn't just win, she sent an eternal message. You don't need anyone's permission to be great. If you believe that justice, courage, and intelligence can change the world, like, share, and subscribe. Let's light up more inspiring stories like this together.